Most people who are fasting right now are not actually fasting. A 2022 survey published in the journal Nutrients found that over 68% of people who identified as intermittent fasters regularly consumed something during their fasted window, coffee, gum, supplements, and had no idea it might be a problem. But here's the thing. Some of those people are completely right to do it, and some of them have been quietly undermining everything they're working toward for months. Today I'm breaking down the exact list of what breaks a fast and what doesn't, with the actual science behind each one. The rule everyone throws around is 0 calories. If it has 0 calories, it doesn't break your fast. Except, that rule is almost completely misleading. Because fasting is not one thing. A person fasting for weight loss is playing a different game than someone fasting for autophagy. Someone fasting to manage blood sugar is operating on different logic than someone doing a 16-8 for general fat loss. The 0-calorie rule is the average answer. And like most averages, it flattens the parts that actually matter. If you're fasting for metabolic health, insulin control, fat oxidation, blood glucose regulation, then calories are not the only variable. Insulin response matters just as much. Some 0-calorie inputs trigger a measurable insulin response. That single fact changes everything about the list we're going through. The clear ones first. Anything with calories from carbohydrates, protein, or fat breaks your fast. Full stop. A banana, a protein shake, oat milk in your coffee, a handful of almonds, bone broth with protein. These spike insulin, halt fat oxidation, and restart your digestive cycle. Take Sarah. She does a 16.8 fast every day, very disciplined. But every morning she adds a splash of oat milk to her coffee. That splash, roughly 20 to 30 milliliters, contains about 15 to 20 calories, mostly from carbohydrates. Research published in Cell Metabolism in 2019 shows that even a modest carbohydrate intake is enough to suppress fat oxidation for several hours and trigger a measurable insulin response. Sarah's fast ends the moment that oat milk hits her bloodstream. Because the amount is small and the habit feels harmless, it never gets examined. Now here's where it gets interesting. Certain 0-calorie inputs have been shown to produce an insulin response. The most studied of these is diet soda. A 2020 study in Physiology and Behavior found that artificial sweeteners, specifically aspartame and sucralose, can trigger a cephalic phase insulin response in some individuals. Your body, upon tasting something sweet, anticipates incoming glucose and releases a small amount of insulin in preparation, before any glucose has actually arrived. For someone fasting strictly for weight loss, this effect may be small enough not to matter much. For someone fasting specifically to lower fasting insulin, a common goal for people managing pre-diabetes or metabolic syndrome, this is exactly the signal they're trying to avoid. A 2021 meta-analysis in Frontiers in Endocrinology found this response is significantly more pronounced in individuals with already elevated baseline insulin. The people most affected are the least likely to know it. Coffee. Plain black coffee, nothing added, does not meaningfully break a fast for most purposes. A 2020 study in Nutrients confirmed that black coffee does not trigger a significant insulin response and does not suppress autophagy markers in healthy individuals. Caffeine has a mild fat oxidation enhancing effect, meaning for weight loss fasting, black coffee may actively support the fast. But coffee is not physiologically neutral for everyone. In roughly 25 to 30% of people, caffeine triggers a mild cortisol spike. Cortisol raises blood glucose. Rising blood glucose produces an insulin response. A 2018 paper in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition documented this specifically and noted it is more pronounced in slow caffeine metabolisers. Black coffee probably does not break your fast for the majority of people, but it may alter your fast in ways that matter depending on your specific goal. That distinction, breaking a fast versus altering a fast, is one of the most underused ideas in this entire conversation. Plain green tea, black tea, and herbal teas with no added milk or sweetener do not trigger a meaningful insulin response. Green tea contains egg-CG, epigallocatechin gallate, which a 2017 study in the European Journal of Nutrition showed actually enhances fat oxidation during fasted states. Green tea during a fast is not just neutral. It is genuinely supportive. The moment something gets added, a chai latte, a matcha with oat milk, a herbal tea with honey, these become meals metabolically. Small ones, but meals. Apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon in water during a fast. The blood sugar benefit is real. A 2019 study in the Journal of Functional Foods found it blunts postprandial glucose spikes. A tablespoon contains roughly 3 calories, almost entirely from acetic acid. Acetic acid does not trigger an insulin response and contains no meaningful carbohydrates, protein, or fat. For weight loss fasting, it is almost certainly fine. For strict autophagy fasting, we don't have direct clinical data on whether acetic acid at these doses affects autophagy signaling. The mechanistic reasoning suggests it probably doesn't, but that gap between probably and definitely is worth naming. Plain sparkling water. Carbonation has no metabolic effect. Flavored sparkling waters are slightly more complicated. Citric acid, in very small doses, has been flagged in some cellular research as a potential mTOR activator. One can occasionally is not a concern. But if flavored sparkling water has become your all-day fasting drink across 4 or 5 servings, particularly during an extended autophagy-focused fast, switch to plain water for that window. Now the category most fasting guides almost completely ignore: supplements. Plain electrolyte powders, sodium, potassium, magnesium, no added calories, no sweeteners, do not break a fast by any serious definition. A review in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition found electrolyte supplementation during fasting had no measurable effect on fasting biomarkers. If you're fasting and exercising, or fasting for longer windows and feeling fatigued, plain electrolytes are not just acceptable, they're sensible. Fish oil capsules contain fat, about 10 calories per standard capsule. Fat is the macronutrient least likely to spike insulin, but technically and calorie strictly speaking, fish oil ends a complete fast. For autophagy-focused fasting specifically, a 2019 paper in the journal Autophagy noted that even small lipid inputs may partially suppress autophagy signaling. Fish oil is a borderline call entirely dependent on what your fast is for. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble. They require dietary fat for proper absorption. Taking them fasted means you absorb a fraction of what the label says, and in some people they cause nausea. They won't dramatically break your fast in terms of insulin impact, but you are largely wasting them. This is a practical problem as much as a physiological one. BCAAs break fasts without exception. Leucine, in particular, is one of the most potent activators of mTOR, a cellular signaling pathway that directly suppresses autophagy. A 2016 study in Nature Cell Biology identified leucine as capable of activating mTOR at concentrations achievable through standard BCAA supplementation. Marcus, 38, been fasting 2 years, serious about his health, takes his BCAAs every morning during his fasted window, because he read online they're fasting compatible and preserve muscle without breaking ketosis. They are not fasting compatible. His fast ends the moment that powder dissolves in water. The information online is genuinely contradictory on this, but the cellular mechanism is unambiguous. BCAAs preserve muscle, and they end the fast. You cannot have both simultaneously. Chewing gum. Most gum contains sorbitol or xylitol, low glycemic, minimal insulin response, 2 to 5 calories per piece. For weight loss fasting, this almost certainly doesn't matter, but the physical act of chewing activates digestive processes independently of what you're chewing. A 2017 study in the journal Appetite found measurable increases in ghrelin, the hunger hormone, following sustained chewing in the absence of food intake. The gum doesn't break the fast biochemically, but it actively makes the fast harder to sustain. Medications. Most taken with plain water during a fast do not meaningfully impact the fast, but some require food for proper absorption or to avoid gastric irritation, and that instruction is not optional. Your medications are not optional. Your fast is negotiable. Never skip or delay a prescribed medication to preserve a fasted state. There's a variable that almost nobody discusses when they talk about fasting windows, and it explains a large portion of the results people aren't getting. Hormonal timing. Insulin is the hormone everyone focuses on, and rightly so. But insulin doesn't operate alone. It operates inside a hormonal ecosystem that includes cortisol, ghrelin, leptin, and growth hormone. And the choices you make in the hours before your fast begins, not just during it, shape that ecosystem significantly. Cortisol follows a natural curve. It peaks in the early morning hours, roughly between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., in what's called the cortisol awakening response. This peak serves a real function. It mobilizes energy for the day, sharpens alertness, and plays a role in fat metabolism. The problem is that elevated cortisol also raises blood glucose, and elevated blood glucose triggers insulin. So for people who fast in the morning, skipping breakfast, starting eating at noon, the cortisol peak is already working against them if they're stressed, sleeping poorly, or consuming caffeine too aggressively early in the morning. A 2019 paper in Psychoneuroendocrinology found that chronic psychological stress blunts the metabolic benefits of intermittent fasting in women specifically, through persistently elevated cortisol, disrupting the normal insulin suppression fasting is meant to produce. You can be following the protocol perfectly on paper and having your fast undermined by something that has nothing to do with food. Leptin is the satiety hormone. It signals fullness and helps regulate energy balance long-term. During fasting, leptin levels naturally fall, which is one of the mechanisms that makes fasting feel hard in the early weeks. But chronic caloric restriction combined with fasting, eating too little during your eating window, can suppress leptin to a level where your body interprets the fasting as a threat, not a tool. A 2020 review in Metabolism found this pattern particularly common in women fasting on low-calorie diets simultaneously, often producing the opposite of intended outcomes: increased fat storage, hormonal disruption, and fatigue that doesn't resolve. More restriction is not always more effective. This is one of the places where the biology directly contradicts the intuition. Growth hormone is perhaps the most underappreciated benefit of fasting. A 1988 study in the New England Journal of Medicine established that fasting dramatically increases growth hormone production, in some cases by up to 2,000% above baseline during extended fasts. Growth hormone drives fat oxidation, preserves lean muscle mass, and plays a central role in tissue repair. This is part of the reason fasting and sleep are such a powerful combination. Growth hormone pulses most strongly during slow-wave sleep. If your sleep is fragmented or shortened, less than 6 hours consistently, you are missing the largest growth hormone release that fasting is designed to amplify. Most fasting content focuses entirely on the fasted window. Almost none of it examines what happens the moment you break it, and how that first meal either builds on or dismantles the metabolic work you've done. When you break a fast, insulin rises. That is expected and appropriate. The question is how sharply and for how long. A fast broken with a high glycemic meal, white rice, fruit juice, toast, even a large serving of oats, produces a sharper insulin spike than the same meal eaten mid-afternoon in a non-fasted state. This is documented in a 2017 paper in Diabetes Care, which found that meal composition at fast breaking had a disproportionate impact on post-meal glucose response compared to identical meals consumed outside the fasting window. Your first meal is not just a meal. It is a metabolic signal that sets the insulin trajectory for the next several hours. The practical implication is this: the person who fasts diligently for 16 hours and then breaks their fast with a smoothie, a piece of fruit, and low-fat yogurt, all widely considered healthy choices, may be producing a sharper insulin response than if they had broken their fast with eggs, avocado, and a small amount of vegetables. Protein and fat, as the primary components of a fast-breaking meal, produce a slower, more sustained insulin rise. They extend the metabolic benefits of the fast rather than abruptly reversing them. A 2021 paper in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirmed that a protein first meal composition at the start of the eating window significantly attenuated the postprandial glucose and insulin response compared to a carbohydrate first meal of equivalent calories. James, 44, fasting for 2 years, consistent 18-6 practitioner, could not understand why his fasting glucose had not improved despite his discipline. His first meal every day was a banana, a date-sweetened protein bar, and oat milk coffee. Each of those is a fast-breaking food, producing exactly the sharp insulin response his fast was designed to prevent. He was working hard for 16 hours and undoing the central benefit of it in the first 10 minutes of eating. Here is the piece almost no protocol discusses honestly. Fasting has a psychological cost that compounds over time if it's not managed, and that cost is a real variable in whether the practice is sustainable. Hunger during a fasted window is not a failure of discipline. It is a physiological signal. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, rises predictably before habitual mealtimes. Your body has a clock, and it learned when food usually comes. That clock does not reset in a week. A 2017 study in Cell Metabolism found that ghrelin patterns adapt to meal timing over several weeks, meaning the hunger spikes during your fasted window genuinely do diminish as your body recalibrates, but only if the eating window is consistent. Irregular fasting schedules that shift by 2 or 3 hours each day prevent this adaptation from occurring. The hunger never fully settles. Social eating is real. Fasting can create friction in work lunches, family dinners that run late, breakfasts with friends. A practitioner who treats every deviation from the protocol as a failure will, at some point, stop. A practitioner who understands the underlying mechanisms and can make deliberate, informed exceptions without spiraling will still be fasting in 3 years. The goal is not to protect the window. The goal is what the window is designed to produce. Keeping those two things separate is the difference between a tool and a cage. Elena has been fasting for 3 years. She holds her window tightly Monday through Friday. On weekends, she eats when it makes social sense. Her results have been consistent across that entire period. Not because she's breaking the rules with no consequences, but because she understands the rules well enough to know which ones cost the most when broken, and which ones cost almost nothing. Sleep is the most underappreciated fasting period most people already have. During deep sleep, insulin levels drop to their lowest point of the day. Growth hormone pulses at its highest. A 2021 review in obesity found that fasting during sleep produces measurable improvements in insulin sensitivity independent of daytime food restriction. The problem is what happens immediately before and after. A late-night snack at 11 p.m. followed by breakfast at 7 a.m. is only an 8-hour fast, not 16. The most underutilized strategy in fasting is simply eating your last meal slightly earlier and delaying the first meal slightly later. No new rules, just a clearer understanding of what you're already doing. Here is the practical framework that resolves everything. If you are fasting for weight loss, black coffee is fine. Plain tea is fine. Plain electrolytes are fine. Water is fine. Anything with protein, carbohydrates, or significant fat ends the fast. If you are fasting for autophagy, BCAAs are out entirely, fish oil becomes questionable, artificial sweeteners become worth avoiding. Even black coffee may blunt some of the cellular signaling that makes extended fasting valuable. Water only, possibly with plain, unsweetened electrolytes. If you are fasting for blood glucose control, artificial sweeteners deserve more scrutiny than standard guides give them, and caffeine deserves a personal assessment based on your own response. Any supplement with carbohydrate content needs to be read carefully before it becomes part of your morning routine. The zero-calorie rule is a starting point, not a complete answer. What breaks your fast depends entirely on what your fast is for, and most people are fasting toward a goal they've never stated in a single clear sentence. Coffee is probably fine. Gum is probably fine biochemically, but makes the fast harder to hold. BCAAs are not compatible with any serious fast. Artificial sweeteners deserve more scrutiny than they typically get. Fish oil is context-dependent. Fat-soluble vitamins taken fasted are being partially wasted. Medications should never be adjusted without medical guidance. Sleep is already working for you. And the psychological dimension, whether the rules you're holding are sustainable over time, is a real variable almost no guide accounts for. The one concrete thing worth doing today is this. Write down, in a single sentence, the actual goal of your current fast. Weight loss. Blood glucose control. Autophagy. Metabolic reset. Pick one. Then look at everything you consume during your fasted window and ask honestly whether each of those inputs is aligned with that specific goal. Not the general idea of being healthier, the specific goal, because the list changes significantly depending on the answer. And here's the question this video can't answer for you. If you've been fasting consistently for weeks or months and the results have plateaued, is it your body adapting to the protocol? Or is it something in your fasted window you've never stopped to examine?